Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi cedes powers to Presidential Leadership Council amid international efforts to end the war. Yemeni consultations conclude in Riyadh today, drafting new roadmap for the country. Houthi mines continue to claim lives of innocent civilians nationwide. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swaylam. Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi issued a presidential decree today to announce that he has transferred powers to a presidential council headed by Rashad al-Alimi and membership of 7 vice presidents. This is considered a major shift in the Yemeni political scene since 2013. The following report has more details.
أعلن إنشاء مجلس قيادة رئاسي لاستكمال تنفيذ مهام المرحلة الانتقالية.
Yemenis nationwide woke up today on a major political shift in the political scene. With the last day of the Yemeni consultations in Riyadh, President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi came out with a presidential decree that included formation of a Presidential Leadership Council and the transfer of its full powers and its deputy to the Council. The Council to complete the implementation of the tasks of the transitional phase in accordance with the Constitution, the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism. The decree stipulated Rashad al-Alimi as the President of the Presidential Leadership Council. Other membership of the Vice Presidents are Sultan al-Arada, Tariq Saleh, Abdurrahman Abu Zar'a, Uthman Mujalli, Abdullah al-Alimi, Aidarus al-Zubaydi and Faraj Salim al-Bahsani. The decree indicated that the Presidential Council is tasked to administer the state politically, militarily and security throughout the transitional phase, and that the Council to negotiate with Houthis a permanent ceasefire and work for achieving a comprehensive political solution that can move Yemen from a state of war to a state of peace. The head of the Presidential Council also approved the rules governing the work of the Council, the Consultation and Reconciliation Committee, the legal team and the economic team. Observers confirm that today's presidential decree has brought together the rival partners in anti-Houthi National Front as a positive sign of closing the chapter of differences and correcting the imbalances that have corroded the body of legitimacy during the past 7 years. Further, it is advised that Houthi militia seize the opportunity of the truce and deal positively with the new political leadership of legitimacy.
Eleven Houthi violations of the truce were committed on the west coast within 24 hours. The military media announced that it had monitored more than 11 violations committed by Houthi militia during the past 24 hours. They further confirmed that the militia had committed 4 violations in Taiz and 7 in Hudaydah. The Yemeni consultations conclude in Riyadh today. Yemenis of wide political spectrum have been debating the current crisis in the country and thinking of ways to bring Yemen from the state of war to a state of peace. More details are within this report.
After days of discussions, Riyadh gathers at the intra-Yemeni consultations began drafting solutions and a roadmap that would address the challenges confronting their country's security and stability. The Gulf Cooperation Council is sponsoring the talks that kicked off last week. GCC Ambassador to Yemen said consensus has prevailed throughout the talks, stressing that everyone in Yemen, without exception, is in agreement on the need to lead their country to stability and prosperity. He added that the Yemeni people are pinning their hopes on their representatives at these consultations, outlining that a draft roadmap is being shaped. The ambassador stressed that Yemen will find the needed support from its brothers at the GCC. In recent days, Yemeni consultations in Riyadh tackled the challenges and obstacles facing the country. The consultations are seen as a platform to diagnose the situation in the country so that it can move from war to peace, and despite that the Houthis have declined the invitation for talks. Gatherers are holding open and expanded meetings with the government to address all pressing issues. According to sources inside the panels, the Yemeni parties are determined to bolster state institutions and enable them to serve the people, reiterating that the solution to Yemeni's problems lies in the hands of the Yemenis themselves. The consultations are set to conclude on Thursday, and they are not considered as a substitute to United Nations negotiations or the Gulf Initiative. An issue that enjoyed consensus at the consultations is the need to reform the performance of the government. The parties discussed the relationship between the various components of the legitimate authority, including between the legitimacy and member states of the coalition. They also discussed the fight against the Houthi militia. Security challenges in all Yemeni provinces were on the table. The discussions cover security solutions and the recommendations that will be adopted by the consultations. The government will be responsible for applying them, as well as uniting national ranks. The Yemeni discussions also cover the possibility of merging various military formations in the battle for liberation.
The Houthi militia carried out a massive campaign of levies in several districts of Ib Governorate. The campaigns were carried out to support missiles and drones, coinciding with the militia's targeting of several governorates in northwestern Yemen. The sources confirmed that the militia's supervisors are putting pressure on citizens, farmers, merchants, and others in the rural areas. A human rights report revealed that the mines planted by the Houthi militia killed 2,818 civilians from April 2014 to March 2022. The report added that mines have injured 3,655 civilians during the same period, in which 17 Yemeni governorates were covered. The report stated that Houthi mines had damaged 5,596 public and private facilities partially and completely. Coming next. April 7th is the World Health Day, while Yemen healthcare system suffers significantly due to the war.
هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ. من الساعة 4 ماشينا الضربة من الحوثيين في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم، يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الرأس ما التقاش، الرأس ما التقاش. الحمد لله.
Welcome back. The world marks April 7th as the International Health Day. This anniversary comes when the healthcare system in Yemen has collapsed because of the war. Most of the health sector infrastructure has been demolished by ongoing atrocities of the conflict. The following report has more details.
Yemen's health sector has been hit hard by the country's long-running armed conflict, economic deterioration, and institutional breakdown. Under the strain of fighting, the availability of a functional health infrastructure has dwindled. Only half of health facilities are fully operational at the moment, and more than 80% of the population has problems gaining access to food and drinking water, as well as health treatment. A shortage of resources and supplies has severely impeded healthcare services, and the conflict has paralyzed healthcare governance. Yemeni health reports detail the country's worsening health problems. High levels of child malnutrition, poor vaccination rates, and outbreaks of transmissible diseases are also mentioned in the studies. The increasing crisis affects mothers and children disproportionately, with the newest data predicting that 1 mother and 6 babies die every couple of hours. Access to high-quality prenatal and postnatal care can mean the difference between life and death for both women and their unborn children. Healthcare workers report that they are understaffed and that they lack essential equipment such as incubators. Meanwhile, pregnant women, new mothers, and newborns are regularly forced to share beds, and infection control measures are inadequate. Yemen has had a number of illness outbreaks in the recent years, including cholera, diphtheria, and more recently the COVID-19 pandemic, adding to the country's already fragile healthcare situation. The rate of COVID-19 vaccination is strikingly low, with only 1.1% of Yemen's population fully vaccinated. The longer the pandemic draws out, the more burden will be placed on under-equipped hospitals and overworked medical personnel, as they fight to keep up with an inflow of patients in need of specialist treatment. Health employees are already subjected to inconsistent pay, staffing shortages, and chronic stress. Reduced foreign health financing, as well as unprecedented pandemic outbreaks such as COVID-19, raise concerns about the future of healthcare in Yemen. Such epidemics have harmed Yemen's unstable health system, putting significant pressure on the country's under-equipped institutions and health workers. Hospitals are severely underfunded, and a lack of beds mean that a significant number of individuals are turned away and forced to care for themselves. Due to a shortage of funds, healthcare staff are underpaid and under stress, barely able to pay the bus fare to the hospital. Yemenis who have been fortunate enough to flee the ravages of violence are tormented by the fear of sickness. The international community must fight harder than ever to keep Yemen's people safe from dangers that have plagued them for so long.
The electricity service was cut off in a number of districts in Aden. Local sources said that one of the energy companies suspended its service in protest against failure of the government to pay the dues to the company. Since the UN Special Envoy announced a 2-month truce in Yemen, oil prices have witnessed relative stability. Such stability in the prices, according to observers, can be attributed to the peace truce declared in Yemen, especially when the truce stopped the drone attacks of Houthi militia on Saudi oil facilities. More on this story is within this report.
After Yemeni citizens have been suffering a lot from oil and gas high prices that affect their daily lives, recently oil prices have settled down after the truce agreement. Oil prices fell at the start of Asian trade after the United Arab Emirates and the Iran-aligned Houthi group welcomed a truce that would halt military operations on the Saudi-Yemeni border, alleviating some concerns about potential supply issues. The early losses this week come after oil prices settled down around 13% last week, which was their biggest weekly fall in 2 years, when U.S. President Joe Biden announced the largest ever U.S. oil reserves release. The UAE state news agency WAM reported that the United Arab Emirates has welcomed the announcement of a UN-brokered truce in Yemen. The Iran-aligned Houthi group, which has been fighting a coalition including UAE in Yemen, also welcomed the truce. The UN-brokered deal between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthis is the most significant step towards ending a conflict that has killed tens of thousands and pushed millions into hunger. The last coordinated cessation of hostilities nationwide was during peace talks in 2016. Market participants have been concerned about global supplies since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last February. Sanctions imposed on Russia over the invasion disrupted oil supplies and drove oil prices to nearly $140 for one barrel, the highest in about 14 years. President Joe Biden launched the largest release ever from the U.S. Emergency Oil Reserve and challenged oil companies to drill more in an attempt to bring down gasoline prices that have soared during Russia's war with Ukraine. The announcement comes as part of a broad effort by Biden to tackle raging inflation that has hurt U.S. consumers and threatens Biden's fellow Democrats as they seek to maintain control of Congress in the November elections. Starting in May, the United States will release 1 million barrels per day of crude oil for 6 months from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The nationwide truce is the first for years in Yemen's 7-year conflict and will allow fuel imports into Houthi-held areas and some flights to operate from Sana'a airport. Yemenis are suffering severely during this time of war. Citizens are not getting their salaries, and those who work with a regular income cannot afford getting their essential needs. They keep fighting hunger and poverty at a time when food and oil prices are increasing madly. People try to survive amid these hard conditions. They just need to provide stability, security, and safety for their families. Is it a lot to ask for?
$3 billion were deposited by Saudi Emirati joint to support Yemen's economy. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia announced the provision of urgent support to the Yemeni economy the day after President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi announced the formation of a leadership council and delegated all his powers to them. The European Union has been a major donor to Yemen. Several projects have been conducted in the country with a direct support from the EU. Recently, it has introduced new funds to support livelihood, resilience, and food security. The following report has more details.
At a time of a truce which Yemen is witnessing within these days, and it has reflected on so many prosperous aspects, including the decrease in oil derivatives prices. The European Union, along with Sweden, have initiated a supporting step to compensate Yemenis for the hard times they lived through during all war years. The European Union and Sweden have contributed new funding totaling $49.37 million to boost resilience, livelihoods, food security, and climate adaptation in Yemen. The new agreement supports the third phase of the Supporting Food Security and Climate Adaptation in Yemen and covers a 3-year period starting in March 2022. According to a UN report, the new phase of the program builds upon the success of Phase 2, a successful 3-year program that was also funded by EU and the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. The program aims to reduce vulnerability and bolster resilience of crisis-affected communities by creating sustainable livelihoods, as well as improving food security and access to basic services in 5 vulnerable governorates in Yemen, namely Hajja, Hudaydah, Lahj, Abyan, and Taiz. The funding will specifically target the most vulnerable community groups, such as women, the unemployed youth, marginalized minority groups, internally displaced people, and stressed host communities. The program will potentially reach nearly 847,000 direct beneficiaries and will be implemented jointly by the United Nations Development Programme, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the International Labour Organization, and the World Food Programme. Considering the social and cultural barriers rural women face in Yemen, the joint program activities will also focus on strengthening women's economic empowerment including women at all stages of implementation and addressing the specific needs and opportunities for women. The EU ambassador to Yemen said, "The European Union believes in the future of Yemen and in the ability of Yemenis to build resilience and pathways towards sustainable development even during the ongoing conflict." He added that, with the additional funding, the EU contributes to investing in Yemen's future while supporting citizens to address immediate challenges. This initiative came at a time when Yemenis are in desperate need of help and compensation for all what they have paid during the war years.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi cedes powers to a Presidential Leadership Council and amid international efforts to end the war. Yemeni consultations conclude in Riyadh today, drafting new roadmap for the country. Houthi mines continue to claim lives of innocent civilians nationwide. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.